Right, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our program this evening. Today is day 7, so I'd like to welcome you all to this session again. Thank you all for joining us once again, and I would just like to ask that you invite your friends, family, share out the links for people to join either via Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube. I think the links will be made available so you can share them out to friends and family, and the Zoom details are on the poster as well. Just a few housekeeping things. Just make sure that everybody's devices are muted at all times. And also just to make sure your cameras are turned off as well, just to avoid any interruptions during the session. During the programme, please feel free to bring any contributions, ask any and all questions relating to anything that's been discussed so far during the programme. And if you've got any contributions that you'd like to make on, anything else or any questions relating to anything similar to the topics that we've been discussing, then please feel free to either send them to myself or directly to me, or post them in the chat as well. And that goes to those on YouTube and Facebook as well. Please post them in the chat and we will pick them up, and they will be discussed as well. Also, I'd just finally like to introduce our speaker again, Dr. S.K. Pandit. Welcome, Doctor, and thank you for being with us again tonight. And I'd now like to hand over to you to do tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So let's get to the sharing of the screen and start today's topic. Just a moment. Just one moment. In the meantime, let me wish all of you a very happy Sabbath. It's still Friday afternoon here, but it's a Sabbath for you, and preparation still going on, but we can have a nice time together. Happy Sabbath. Especially this weekend, I would like to take this topic, tomorrow, 2 topics. We'll put them actually as one. So I hope that those who start viewing even now or continue viewing even now will treat these 3 as one session. So here is where we're going to start the review. We asked 5 questions out of the 10, which was supposed to help us see the red marble, the most unique one. So the first question: the New Testament is the best attested ancient historical piece of literature in the world, and we could consider it the gold standard for historicity of that period. Number 2, the only scripture with an open test for possible divine origin. We saw that the other evening. It's called predictive prophecy. Can you state what will happen later on and check it out to see if it will really happen? And we found that it is an amazingly accurate book. Number 3, the top feature is beyond human ability. Each author would reference another, saying that they got their information from the Lord, and the Lord also gave the other prophet the information that he gave. So the Lord then was the supervisor in the writing of the whole book, which lasted from 1400 to 1500 years. No one supervisor can last that long. So we thought that that feature was clearly beyond human ability. Number 4, the question was, what's the highest claim you make for yourself? And we found that Jesus made the highest claim for himself, that of being God. Even if we cannot establish that he is God at that moment, by comparing the claims, he said he was God. The others also could have said they were God, but they never claimed that. Why didn't they claim to be God? Because they knew they were not. So on that face value, well, he said he was God, so we gave him that position and said, okay, that's the highest claim anyway. That was the answer to my question. What's the highest claim you make for yourself? Number 5 was the next one we saw yesterday. How do you describe your message and mission? All the other founders were given and taught a message, which they then taught to the public. Jesus was unique. He claimed to be his message. All the other founders said, look, I have been given this message. I'm going to bring this message to you. I'm going to teach it to you. Jesus said, I am the message. So the words I am set him apart as absolutely unique. Could that be a red marble? Well, we are looking for that still. So out of these five questions we have seen, it does look like it's pointing to that side. So today, the question is the life record of the founders compared with their teachings. The question, how did your life match with your own teachings? Did you provide the message in word only or in actual practice in life? You wanted the people to bring their behavior and practice into line with your teachings. Did you do that yourself? And I consider this to be a true acid test of the claims. One of the reasons why it is such a strong test is because I'm not going to use another standard to test the founders. I'm going to use their own words from their own writings to test their lives. So, how did you match up with your own teachings, with your own message? That is what we are doing this evening. And in this session, I intentionally looked for faults and mistakes because that was the aim of this question. Can I find some faults and mistakes? Normally, you notice that in most of them, I was just looking for what the claim was and accepting it face value. Here, in one sense, we will accept it face value if it is written in their writings. But I'm going to look at the writings to find out if there's something that is different from the life record. In other words, your life record I can see, but is it exactly the same as your teachings? That's the question. So, with that, let's get on to the religions. Hinduism. Here's a teaching. When a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires can alone achieve peace. Can you see those words alone? And in the previous sentence, then, only when you knock this off, then you have something. And what is this sense gratification and incessant flow of desires? Well, anything that grips you. But in this case, it's very clear that what they mean is actually sensual desires and really sex. That's the main thing. It's not wrong. That also is what they say. But what they say is, look, don't let it dominate your thinking. Don't let it be so much a part of you. Keep it to the side. It's okay, it's good, but keep it to the side so that it doesn't dominate you. If it does not dominate you, only then can you be in transcendental consciousness. In other words, come up to the point of real inner peace. That's the teaching. But here are the words of Gautama Buddha when he was a Hindu and he studied his Hindu books and he said, our holy books tell us of gods, sages, and heroes who, though high minded, were addicted to sensuous passions. Addicted, I underlined that word. It's not there in the original, but I wanted to just underline it to point it out. It's not that they didn't put it aside, they kept it there, and not only was it ordinarily in their lives, they were addicted to it. That's amazing because there's a teaching here. And are you keeping to the teaching? That was the question. One of the most open and glaring examples of going against this clear rule is found in the life of Krishna. And what's the clear rule? Keep away sensuous things, sexual activity. Krishna is the eighth incarnate of the god Vishnu. In some circles, he is claimed to be the supreme personality of the Godhead. He is described in the writings, traditional writings, as being playful, but that is not the whole story. He was known for his sexual activities, and it's there in the writings. Nobody can dispute that. He was deeply disliked by the men in Mathura, which was the town where, besides which he was growing up. He grew up in Vrindavana, and the people in Mathura, the next town, they didn't like him at all. Why? Because he was fooling around with their wives. His favorite is written down. Her name was Radha. And many Hindus, describe Radha as somebody very exalted and probably almost like a goddess, but actually she wasn't. She was just a wife of another person in the town. And here are the words of in the writings. When Ayana Ghosha is Radha's husband. When Ayana Ghosha heard of Radha's adultery, he went in search of the couple. Who make up the couple? Radha and Krishna. However, Krishna assumed the form of a goddess and they thereby escaped Ayana Ghosha's wrath. So, what is he doing? He's not keeping himself away. He's going ahead. In fact, you identify Krishna with that flute. Any god of in the Hindu literature, little dark colored with a flute is Krishna. Krishna used to play the flute beautifully. And one of the ways he would use it was to seduce the girls around him. And it is there in the writings. There are multiple such stories of his behavior. In fact, once upon a time, he wanted to fool around with the girls. They'd all gone to the river for a bath. He gathered all their clothes and climbed up a tree nearby. And he said, "If you want your clothes, come one by one and see me." Really? Is that how a spiritual leader really behaves? And if you see the writings, he was chided for that by the opposite army people, the ones he was going to go and fight. They pointed at him and said, "You want to fight on the battlefield? Hey, wait a minute. This is army. This is war. This is not fooling around with other women." Those are the words. Why? Because in the story, that's what he was doing. So in some traditional writings, he is claimed to have, whoa, much more than Solomon, 16,000 wives. Even if this number is only figurative, it does confess to his way of life. He is said to have fathered 180,000 sons. Now, this is not in line with the principle of abstaining from sensual activities so as to keep the mind focused on transcendental meditation. Really, 180,000 sons, 16,000 wives. How much time do you really have for transcendental meditation? Can you see? It's a difficult proposition. The life does not seem to match his teachings. Buddhism. These are the words of Gautama Buddha. Here, venerable gentlemen, are the four rules about the offenses which deserve expulsion from the monastery. If you live there, you got to have these four rules. If you break any of these four, out you go. The first one is if a monk should have sexual intercourse with anyone. The second one was you must not steal. The third, we must not murder. And the fourth one was do not claim supernatural powers when you do not have them. So if you break any of these four, expelled. What's the first one? No sexual intercourse with anyone. The fact is, Gautama Buddha Siddhartha, he was married and had a son, so he did have sexual intercourse. But really, that's not the whole story. The traditional writings describe something else. At his birth, a prophet named Asita came down from the foothills of the Himalayas to the kingdom of the Gautama clan. His father was the king of that clan. His name was Sudhodana, and Asita told Sudhodana, "You're going to have a son. You have to make a choice. Do you want the son to be a world emperor? Or do you want your son to go out into the wilderness to look for light and truth? He will be like one of these ascetics, half clad, half naked. Which one do you want?" And naturally, Sudhodana said, "I want my son to be a world emperor, not somebody who goes out into the boonies looking for truth and light." So the prophet gave the father these four conditions. He said, keep these things. Do not let your son Siddhartha, who later became Gautama Buddha, do not let set his eyes on any of these four: old age, disease, suffering, or death. So the father said, sure, I'm going to make sure he doesn't set his eyes on those. And so he made multi-storied palaces And he kept his son on the top stories, top level, never let him come down even to the palace grounds or to the town because he might set his eyes on those forbidden things. So, how do you keep a young man entertained? We don't have to guess because the writings tell us. He was entertained by women minstrels. And here's the description: they entertained him with wanton swayings, butterfly kisses, and seductive glances. Thus, he became a captive of these women who were well versed in the subject of sensuous enjoyment and indefatigable in sexual pleasure. See the plural women, so just not one. Who knows, maybe might have been an orgy. And even if it is not, this is every day from the age of 16 to the age of 29. Every day, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year for 13 years. This is his life. And yet, the teaching said, you must not have this at all. No wonder when he left the palace, by the way, he did set his eyes on old age, suffering, and death. And that is why he left the palace looking for light and truth. For 6 years, he did that out there. And during those years of searching, this is what he said: in fulfillment of my vows, I have plucked out the hair of my head and the hair of my beard, have gone down to the water punctually thrice before nightfall to wash away the evil within. These are his own words. He had evil which had to be washed away 3 times a day. I don't know for how long, definitely more than once. Day after day, maybe 3 times a day. That's a lot of dirt to be washed off. The fact really is that word evil might actually preclude him from being a Buddha or even a Bodhisattva, which is a stage just before being a Buddha, you become a Bodhisattva. The point really is to get to that stage, you have to increasingly purify your life. And it's purified over hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of lives, one after the other, get better, better, and better. When you come to the point of the Bodhisattva, you have to live a perfect life. Why? Because karma, the law of karma says that you pay for your karma of one life, not in the same life, but in the next. So if your next life has to be clear, the previous life has to be completely perfect. Then you are not paying for that in the next life. Here he already has evil. How could he be a Buddha? He didn't even reach a Bodhisattva, which is supposed to be a perfect life. So that's a big question, isn't it? Islam, these are the words in chapter 4 of the Quran. Then you may marry other women who seem good to you, 2, 3, or 4 of them. That's the maximum that the Quran allows, 4. When you look at the life of Muhammad, there are 2 periods of his life actually. One is the Meccan years, the earlier years, and then when he left Mecca to go to Medina, which is the start of the Islamic calendar. These 2 periods are quite different in their life, in the way he lived. In the Meccan years, he had only one wife. By the time he went to Medina, he became not only a preacher of the message from Allah, but he was also a military general. It shifted out. And as a military general, he became like the other kings. So he had more than one wife. In fact, anywhere from 11 to 19 wives. So what happened to this number, 4? In their tradition, and we'll accept it as a tradition, Muhammad is called the perfect man. But look at the next one. We, Allah, have given you, Muhammad, a glorious victory so that God, Allah, may forgive your past and future sins. Those are not words that somebody else put into the Quran. They are the words from there. Some people say mistakes, not sins. Even mistakes need forgiving. So you did have, okay, we'll use the word mistake or sins. How about the next one? Chapter 93 says, did he, Allah, not find you, Muhammad, in error and guide you? You needed guidance because you were in error. You had mistakes and sins. Muhammad is called and is claimed to be the perfect man. And we will accept it that he is the perfect man. But the perfection that Islamic tradition portrays can also have mistakes and sins and errors. Can you see that? And also, if something is written clearly for all the rest, well, you can have it a little different because you are an exception. For example, four wives for everybody else, but you can have more than four. You can have 10 or 11. That throws off something else. He is also not only called the perfect man, he's also called the perfect example. But how can he really be the perfect example is if he is given an exception by Allah to marry more than four. Yes, he says he was given an exception. If you are given an exception, then you stand by your exception and say you're a perfect man, that's fine. But then you cannot be an example, one or the other, not both. So when you look at the whole thing, somewhere along the line, there was a falling. How about Judaism? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not bear false witness. We're going to look at three Hebrew greats, the big ones. Here's Abraham. No, for example, no, Moses first. Here are the words. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed him and hid him in the sand. That's his story. So what did he do? He murdered. So he went against that law. Abraham, he went into Hagar, had sex with her. She conceived. What was this? Hagar was not his wife. He made her his wife. She was not his wife. So adultery. And then when he went to a neighboring kingdom, he told that king of that kingdom, Sarah, my wife is actually not my wife, she's my sister. It's a white lie. She was his sister, but she also was his wife. So what was he doing? He was telling a lie, and he was chided by the king. He said, "Why did you not tell me that she was your wife?" In other words, you're a representative of your God, and you're bluffing me. You see, even Abraham didn't stand up to the test at that point. How about David? Then David sent messengers and took her. Who is her? Bathsheba. Took her. Bathsheba was not his wife. Adultery. And then to cover that up, he sends the husband, who was one of his loyal soldiers, to the front line specifically to be killed. He told the commander, set Uriah, the wife, the husband of Bathsheba, in the forefront of the hottest battle and retreat from him. Send him there, keep away from him so that he may be struck down and die. Cold-blooded murder. None of the three Hebrew greats kept up to their teachings. So far, doesn't seem like any of them were keeping up to their teachings. Then we come to Jesus, Christianity. When you read the writings, he is accused of a sin. It's the sin of blasphemy. In fact, here are the words. Then the Jews took up stones to stone him. And they said, why? For blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God. So he was accused. Blasphemy is a horrible sin in any religion. And so the question is, did he break the law then? According to the words, yes, he broke the law. In fact, who said so? The Jews said so. And that's the writing in the book of John. But John himself, who wrote the writings, did he say so? No, he claimed the opposite. He said that Jesus was not a blasphemer, but was truly God. In fact, the first chapter of his book says the word Jesus was God. So, boy, the Jews said he was a blasphemer, but the writings report it, but the writings themselves do not call him a blasphemer. So we were looking for the writings to state what it is supposed to be. And when we read the writings on which we base our whole assessment and evaluation, then the writings stand by him. They don't agree with the Jews. So we can hold this for the moment and say, hey, wait a minute, we don't know. If you call him a blasphemer, and if he is a blasphemer, then he sinned. But if he is not a blasphemer, and if he really is God, then he didn't do any sin. So we have looked at this part. And because as a question, we should look at his life. So that is what we will do next after this break. So, any questions?
Okay, thank you. Yes, we do have a couple of questions. I think these have come through from yesterday's presentation, if that's okay. Okay, so this question is it's quite long. I'll read through all of it and then probably go through it. It's in 3 sections. So the person is asking, you mentioned in Tuesday's seminar that you couldn't classify the Hebrew scriptures. So number one, please provide examples of why it can't be purely historical. Number two, does this mean that Christians would be more accurate in following the New Testament writings alone? And then number three, if not, will there be discrepancies in the Christian faith because they quote the Hebrew scriptures so much?
Very good questions, actually. Very good. I got 3 of them. The question is the first one actually relates to the Old Testament, right? And
Yes, I'll go over it again. So it says, you mentioned in Tuesday's seminar that you couldn't classify the Hebrew scriptures. So please provide some examples of why it can't be purely historical. That's the first one.
Okay. Example of how it is difficult to place some parts. And I mentioned some parts. I said some are very accurately historical and some are not. The places where they are not are places where you cannot go back and check. That's what I meant. In fact, some are really, it's almost the same as mythological. For example, the first chapter of Genesis, it says God created. How can anyone go and check that out? And he created in 6 days and he just spoke and it was done. So that sounds like a mythological story on its face value. So when you look at that, and then when you look at some people living 900 years old, oh, wait a minute, we don't live that long. So it sounds like that. And when it sounds like that, when you want to go and test it out, there is no way to test it. So that is why I said some parts are, and some parts are so accurate. So how do you deal with this? Here's how I think you should deal with it. First of all, we said the New Testament is solidly historical. Every writer, especially Luke, when he writes it down, we have found that the greatest archaeologists in the world have said that is the strongest historical document we can have. Now, in that document, Luke constantly quotes the Old Testament, constantly. All the New Testament authors quote the Old Testament. So when you look at a solidly historical author quoting something, and even if you cannot test it out, face value, you just state that it is reliable. You cannot yourself check it out because we can't, but we take it through that way. One, the quotes from the New Testament that is quoting the Old. All of them say God created in 6 days. All of them, at least not all, whoever says clearly state that it was created in that way. God formed it. So, one, the quotes from the New Testament. Two is when you look at the historical writings in the Old Testament, Kings, Chronicles, these are historical writings. When you check them out against archaeology, remember that statement by the Jewish archaeologist Nelson Gluck? He said there's not a single archaeological find that controverts a biblical reference. The biblical reference he's referring to is the Old Testament too. Not a single. In other words, whatever is written down there, when there's a question between that and the archaeology always sustains the Old Testament writings. There are many, many examples of that. So when we look at these two, Even if we cannot classify all of the books, 39 books there, into one classification, we can give it an overriding idea that it is reliable enough for the New Testament writers to quote from it. Then it is reliable enough for us also to quote from it, although we ourselves cannot establish its historicity. The second one was, so should we go to the New Testament alone? No, we can't, because the New Testament alone will never identify the Messiah. The Messiah is identified only by the Old Testament. Only because there's an Old Testament that gives us the way to identify the Messiah can we say in the New Testament that the New Testament has identified the Messiah. So you cannot have only the New Testament. The New Testament fully, totally bases itself on the Old Testament. Number three, what's the third one?
So number 3 was, if not, will there be discrepancies in the Christian faith because they quote the Hebrew scriptures so much?
No, I think I've already answered that. No, you have to. It's not the question of quote them so much. You have to quote them. That the only way. There are 3 people named in the New Testament who could stand before the public, whoever you are, whether you are Jew or whether you are Gentile, they could clearly show that Jesus was the Messiah. How did they do it? Always by referring to the Old Testament. Because in those days, that's all the scriptures they had, the Old Testament. So when we look at that, we see that the way that the New Testament grew and based itself is really quoting from the Old Testament. Without the Old Testament, you cannot have even a New Testament. So both of them go together.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so basically it's just that the whole book is important. Basically, you can't really have one without the other. The next question I've got here is, during the Q&A yesterday, you said that the God of the New Testament does not force us to do anything. However, the God of the Old Testament seemed to, for example, with Prophet Jonah. So is Jesus different from the God of the Hebrew scriptures?
The question of force is a very big question. In other words, it's even today. Is the God that is described in the Judeo-Christian scripture, does he give people really freedom of choice? That's a big question. So when you look at certain events, you might be tempted to think there is no choice there because for example, you mentioned Jonah. He put him into the belly of the big fish. What kind of a choice is that? But remember, if that was the case, then why did God allow him to get in that ship at all? Some point God was allowing him to do. Otherwise, he could have just told him, hey, you're not listening to me, I'll kill you. Boom, out. Somewhere along the line, God does give a choice, and Jonah did make a choice. He said, I'm not going to go to Nineveh. I'm going the other direction, opposite way. So he went. Who stopped him? Nobody stopped him at that point. All right, that's number one. Then, of course, he was thrown into the ocean, and he said why, and gave them a reason why, because I'm running away from my God, so he's punishing me, and he'll punish you also. You better throw me out. And they threw him out, and a big fish, according to the story, came and swallowed him. And then inside there, what did he do? He prayed. What did God do? Tell him, you ran away, you get it right now? No. He said, I'll take you out from there now, and I will listen to now your choice again. Now make a choice. Sure, he said, I'll go to Nineveh. And he went to Nineveh. So here is a story, and it's a good story because it tells us that at certain points, God does give us a choice, and at sometimes he does not appear to give us any choice at all. That is true because he is over all. So anything that happens is his responsibility. So at any time you can say, hey, he didn't give me a choice. That is true. You can say that. But then you will also have to explain those parts in which he did give a choice. And if you're very careful, and if you go through it carefully and look not just at the people's lives, not just at your life and mine, but he did send his son to this earth. And he did work with him. He did deal with him. And when you look carefully at that point, at the critical, crucial point, God gave the human race the choice. At the point whether you want to stay in earth, which is bound for hell, or you want to go to heaven, at that point, full freedom of choice to every single person on earth. That is the story of true Christianity. So, really, does he give a choice? It looks like he forced, but when you look at the actual nitty gritty, the point that makes a difference, he gives humans the full freedom of choice.
Thank you very much. I've got 2 more questions. Do you want me to go ahead and do them now, or do you want to continue?
Why don't we finish the presentation and then we'll come back to those?
Okay, no problem.
Oh, give me a few seconds.
Oh, I think we've also got a hand up. Should I ask for that to be taken at the end as well, please? Yeah.
No, you can ask it now and write it down if you can.
Okay. Okay.
He can ask for it, and then we'll see whether I can answer it right away or later on.
Okay. Mark, would you like to go ahead, please?
Yeah. Can I go ahead for my question?
Yes, please.
Okay. My question is, when we come to the Torah, the Torah, or even the New Testament, we have the ancient manuscripts, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes.
Which relates directly to, the Bible, the Old and the New Testament.
Okay. Only the Old.
And only about somehow the Old Testament relates to the New Testament. The New Testament. I'm trying to extrapolate. That's what I mean.
A little slowly, like I said, I can't hear well, so
yeah. I'm trying to extrapolate. That's what I mean. But they don't link them directly. You understand? Because since the
one sec.
Let me ask the question again.
No. Speak a little slowly because I am hard of hearing.
Okay.
So sometimes when you speak fast, I can't get your words.
Okay, so I'm a stammerer. I'm a stammerer. That's why I speak fast, a little bit fast. But I'll take my time and I'll try and do my best.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes.
On which the ancient on which is couched. The ancient manuscripts.
Yes.
Good. And then, like you said the other day, Dr. Lu's book is one of the best so far in terms of its historical content and the historicity. Can the other 4, how do you call it, great religions of this world, like you mentioned, the Hindu, Buddhist, and the Muslims, do they have any? Do they have something as such in terms of manuscripts that they could use to challenge?
Yeah. Very good.
The Bible, because we have we can put something on the plate. As really, if you are challenging us, here you are. Let's go to that. Let's go to the Dead Sea Scrolls. You understand it? Let's go to even the Roman history, even Hammurabi's and all those guys, all those writers. You understand it? They are tests to the historicity, the historical value, the efficacy of the Bible. Do the other 4 religions, the 4 religions, do they have something that is authentic that could rival the challenge what we have as Christians? Thank you very much.
Okay, your question really is because we claimed that the background and backing of a document is reliable based on the number of manuscripts, And because we said that the New Testament is backed by 24,900 manuscripts, the question is, are the writings of the other religions backed by documents like this? No, very little. That is the difference. When you look at, for example, let's look at, we said the vastness of the Buddhist literature. We have one volume, maybe two, New Testament and Old Testament. They have 470 volumes, and 100 of those volumes are 1,000 pages each. So it's huge, but they do not have many manuscripts. When you look at even the Hindu literature, it's only just a little bit here and a little bit there, then they put it together. We don't even know the dates of some of these. So when you look at that, when you look at Buddhist, when you look at the Hindu, we do not have much of manuscripts. The only other one would be Islam. It may have had manuscripts, but really not manuscripts. Remember, we said that the Quran was compiled, brought together into a book. And we said that the sources from where Zayd bin Thabit and his friends brought it together to form the Quran was from 5 sources: the stems of palm leaves, the shoulder blades of camels, the pieces of leather, pieces of paper, and people's memory. These are the sources from which they made their manuscripts, okay? Then they got it together to form the Quran. When the second compilation was done under the Caliph Uthman, the third Caliph, Uthman, who was the top guy, he said, once we have formed it, we will destroy all the other manuscripts so that there's no more any variation reading here and this tribe reading it another way and that person reading it in a different way. We'll have only one Quran and all the other manuscripts destroyed. So even if they had many manuscripts, they're all destroyed. We cannot go back to say that the Quran really were the words that Muhammad said. We can't check it out. So when you look at all those others, to have anything more than maybe 500-600 manuscripts is big. And instead of 600, we have 24,900. The comparison, there's no comparison. So what you are saying is, yes, they do have it so small that it can't be compared to the New Testament at all. Any other question on that?
Thank you.
Okay. Let's carry on.
Yeah, I think we can carry on and then we'll come back to the other ones afterwards. Thank you.
Right. We said we're going to then look at Jesus. They accused him of blasphemy, and we saw that the writings did not accuse him. It was the Jews who accused him, but the writings stood by him. Now we're going to look at the writings to see whether he stood the scrutiny that we're going to now undertake. Number 1, I'm going to write or present 12 statements. Number 1 statement, Pilate. Pilate was a Roman governor. Romans and Jews did not love one another. They hated each other with a passion. And the Roman governor said this, indeed, having examined him, Jesus, in your presence, I have found no fault in this man. And in the book of John, he says, I find no fault in him at all. Number 2, Pilate again says that I sent him to Herod, and Herod sent him back because he also didn't find a fault. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back. Number 3, Pilate's wife. Now, this was the time when Pilate was at the judgment seat. And he got a note in his hand from a messenger. And the note was from his own wife. And his wife's note was, hey, watch what you are doing about this man who is before you in judgment, because I've heard of him. And also last night I had a dream about him. He is not an ordinary prisoner. In fact, the wife said, that just man. What's the meaning of just? A person who is good. So Pilate's wife, just man. How about the Roman centurion at the cross? Now, this is the end of his life. He looks up at the cross and watches how Jesus dies and what he's saying there, and he is absolutely amazed. And he said, certainly, this was a righteous man. A righteous man is a person who has lived along and according to the rules of whatever he believed. He is a righteous man, said the Roman centurion. Number five, there were two thieves who were crucified alongside Jesus, one on either side. One of them looked at him and said, sir, if you are really such a big, great Messiah and you have so much power, why don't you take us down from the cross? And the other person on the other side of Jesus looked at him and said, hey, why are you talking like that? You and I are hanging here on the cross because of what we did. We were the wicked ones. We were the criminals. And then he turns around and tells him, but this man has done nothing wrong. Whether he knew Jesus well or not, I don't know, but these are his words. He has done nothing wrong. All these five saw Jesus from a long distance away. So, from a long distance, looking at the broad scenery, they could find nothing wrong in this man. How about those who were close by? You know, in those days, it was a great honor if a rabbi passed by your house and asked your son to be one of his followers. Uh, Talmidin, they call them. Let him be my follower. And it was such an honor because, especially if the rabbi was a well known rabbi. And from what we read, when Jesus began his ministry itself, he was a well known rabbi. Even though he never went to the rabbinical schools, there was something about him that caught people's attention. And so here he is going by the people and saying, you follow me, and they immediately go. Now, in those days, they did have a certain prayer that the parents would pray when they were sending their son to follow a rabbi. And the prayer would go something like this: may the dust from your rabbi's sandals fall upon your garment. What is the meaning of that? The meaning is that may you follow so closely behind him that the dust will fall onto you, meaning watch him closely. Let him teach you closely. Watch him closely from morning till evening, because the most important aim of a student is to become like his rabbi. How he walks, you will walk. How he sits, you will sit. How he speaks, you will speak. How he eats, you will eat. Everything become like your rabbi. And so they would watch their rabbi from morning till evening, every detail. So here's John, the disciple of Jesus, watching him from morning till evening, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, for 3.5 continuous observation. At the end, he says, in him, there is no sin. A person who was right there. How about disciple Peter? Describing Christ, he said, without blemish, without even a spot. That's another disciple who watched him every day. How about the other one, Paul? He wrote the book of Hebrews. He said he was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. So we're watching a certain picture developing that is quite amazing. These three were Jesus' close disciples. And how about a person who was disloyal to him? Judas had betrayed him, and then afterwards he felt bad, felt remorseful. So he took the pieces of silver he got for betraying and went back to the priest and threw it at the priest's feet and said, no, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. He is innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. He's the innocent one. I have sinned. So with this 9, we see that 9 individuals made the statements very clearly that in him there seemed to be no sin at all. How about number 10? Number 10 is very strong. Do you know that Jesus is the only founder of one religion who is called by name in the writings of another religion. We mentioned this earlier. Jesus, Isa bin Maryam, is mentioned 93 times in the Quran. 16 times he is identified by his mother's name, Isa bin Maryam. And 11 times he is called Al-Masih, the Messiah. And in the Quran, these are his words. The angel told Mary, he, Jesus, shall lead a righteous life. And then describing him, here are the words, a holy, blameless son. These are the words in the Quran. Do you remember what the words of the Quran about Muhammad? Sin and error. But about Jesus, holy, blameless. How about number 11? Look into your own life if you can. I'll look into mine. Let's look into our conscience and find out whether we can bring out a clean slate. How many of us can look in there and say, hey, nothing wrong? Boy, it's exactly the opposite. You look inside there and examine your own life, and all you can say is, woe is me. If you try to evaluate, you'll sink even before you start. And so it is very, very unusual. In fact, I've written out the words on the screen. Kung Xiu, that's his Chinese name. His Western name is Confucius. Now, if you know anything about Confucius, he was known in his community as the perfect gentleman, kind, generous, very outgoing, helpful, wouldn't do anything against anyone. He seemed almost like a perfect person. That's how they portray him. But look at his own words. How dare I claim to be a sage or a benevolent man? I am not. Contrast that, yours words, my words, Confucius' words about Jesus. He was facing the bitterest enemies of his life who were thirsting for his death. And he told them, which of you convicts me of sin? Do you know what the response was? Silence. Look through history, my friends. See how many lives you can find who looked at their bitterest enemies and says, can you show me one sin? And the answer is silence. You will not find another. So that is number 11. Number 12 doesn't seem to be at the outset, but the Sanhedrin question was, are you then the Son of God? Now, how come this question shows us anything? The Sanhedrin met at 3 levels. If it was an ordinary case, you just stole somebody's handbag or something like that, then 3 members of the Sanhedrin would be enough to pass judgment. If it was major, then you would require 23 members of the Sanhedrin. That's the second level. If it was something to do with the whole nation, a national question, then usually it is the whole Sanhedrin of 70 members plus 1, the chief priests. They would sit in judgment. Now, we don't know exactly the number, but we do know that most likely they would have called the whole council to meet. Definitely more than 23. So can you imagine 23 judges sitting in judgment? So these, let's say 23. They were sitting in judgment, and the way the Jewish jurisprudence is set up is that you have to call witnesses. You can't just pass judgment. It's an open trial, in other words. So they called witnesses 1, 2, 3, and they could not find anything to accuse Jesus of. It went on and on. Finally, the chief priest realized that if he doesn't do something about it, he might escape, because they were unable to convict him. So, against the law, because a prosecuting attorney, or rather the judge, cannot become a prosecuting attorney. 23 judges, or the chief judge is the chief priest, and he steps down from that and becomes a prosecuting attorney and turns to Jesus and he says, I'm going to ask you a question. And he puts him under oath. Jesus was not answering much till that time, but he put him under oath. And that oath is such a severe, heavy oath to a Jewish mind. You cannot not answer, you cannot keep silent. He says, I adjure you by the living God. That is too much of an oath to keep silent on. You cannot. Tell us if you are the Son of God. Why did he ask him if he was the Son of God? Think. Because the whole 23 judge bench, calling one witness after another, hoping to put him to death. How do you put a person to death? By showing he did this wrong or he didn't do that which is right. He did or didn't do something against the law. That is why that's the only way to put him to death. Bringing witness after witness, they could not find anything wrong with anything he had done or not done. That is why the chief priest shifted out from what did you do or what did you not do to who are you? The shift from deed to identity tells us that there was nothing wrong in the deeds, because if there was, they could have brought that out. So when he shifted out from that, it tells me in a court of law, you are shifting out from the deeds to the identity. And then when I look through judicial history, I do not find a single individual who was sentenced to death on only one point, your identity. It has to be identity plus something else, not just identity. But here he was put to death by just identity. Why? Because they could not find anything they had done wrong, either in commission, doing, or in omission, not doing. So with these 12 points, suddenly I realized, I hope you realize, that finally we have found somebody whose teachings are matched in life. All the principles that he taught were brought to a completion in real life, practical life. Therefore, here and here alone can you and I see a life that was lived to what I would call an unblemished perfection. So here and here alone do we meet somebody who could turn to you and me and to everybody else and say with a clear conscience and with the full right of his life, you follow me. Nobody else has that right, because if you followed any of the others, you would still fall. Only if you followed this man would you be able to go upward and upward and only upwards. So, 15 million minutes of life on this earth, in the midst of a wicked and corrupt generation. Every thought, every deed, every purpose, every work, privately and publicly, from the time he opened his baby eyes until he expired on the cross, were all approved of God. Never once did our Lord have to confess any sin, for he had no sin. He alone carried the spotless purity of childhood, untarnished through youth and manhood. Christ's self-conscious purity is astonishing, because none of us has that. Sinless perfection and perfect sinlessness is what we would expect of God incarnate, and this we do find in Jesus. The hypothesis and the facts concur. Are we looking at the red marble? Because we have looked at the actual writings. And from there, we have picked out our evidences that we will form as our basis for our beliefs. Now, it looks strong, and it is strong. But here's one more thing to take note of. One of the aspects in the study of medicine, when I was doing medicine, is to evaluate reports in a medical journal. And when there's an article that comes out saying this is the conclusion of the study, if the data is unusually one-sided, it does raise red flags and calls for close scrutiny. What we have done so far, if you noticed, 6 questions, 3 to the writings and 3 to the founders, And in all of them, Christianity and Jesus came out on top. So I began to get a bit uncomfortable because could it be that I was pushing them on top? After all, I'm a biased guy, like everyone else is. Okay, nobody is not biased. But was I pushing? So I became uncomfortable and I stopped my search at that point and I said, no, this won't do because I want to know the truth of the matter. And if I am doing that, then I'm only destroying my own base. I need to be convinced myself that it is okay. So what I did, I deliberately looked for topics in which Jesus would not be at the top. Think about it. I'm trying to get to the truth of the matter. And I found three studies in which Jesus does not come out on top. So if he does not come out on top, where does he finally land up? Last. So be sure to come again at 11:30 tomorrow and we will look at those three questions, the next three questions which Jesus comes out last. 11:30 tomorrow. Question time.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. So we've got a couple of questions. So the first one I've got here is you mentioned something earlier in the presentation tonight, and I think the quote was saying, "We have given you a glorious victory, so that God may forgive your past and your future sins." And I think that was in chapter 48, if that's correct.
Yes.
And then in that statement, it refers from the Quran. It starts off as we, and I think you referred to we as Allah in the beginning. If we is referring to Allah, I remember I think either yesterday or the day before you spoke about how there was the sometimes a confusion between Islam and Christianity in the sense of being having a belief in one God and many gods, but then for Islam they view Christianity as having more than one God because we have the Trinity, and then vice versa. In the Quran, God is referred to in we. So and like in plural sometimes when they're speaking of God, even though it's only one God. So it's based on the understanding of that. But then in this statement, it says, "We have given you a glorious victory so that God may forgive your past." So if God is we, why is it referring to God again later on, if that makes sense?
Yes, because that's the explanation there is that is language. Now, if you notice language, many Eastern languages, that is how they speak.
Mm-hmm.
So suppose I'm standing in front of you and I am asking you for something. I won't tell you give me. I will say give us.
Mm-hmm.
So the plural can often be used for a singular. So there's no difference between plural and singular in certain circumstances. So the explanation is that this is language of the Quran. When 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 Allah is speaking, He can say us and He can also say Allah.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter. So in whatever He wants to use, if you I don't know if the person who is asking has read the Quran, it'll be good to read. And you'll find that this is constantly the theme, shifting out from one to the other, to the other, to the other, words that can be used. So it needs explanation, but you don't question them. You just ask for an explanation. So
Mm-hmm.
if you ask for an explanation, why did they use, I don't know why. Remember, the why question is the hardest questions and the most flexible question, the broadest question, the most hazy, nebulous questions.
Yeah.
But if you read the whole of the Quran, it's often used. So it's not something unusual to use Allah and say we or our and us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. The next one is how do you change somebody's way of thinking when they are so embedded in their religious beliefs and refuse to know what we claim is the truth, or the truth is, sorry.
So the question is why, how do you change somebody's mind? Is that the
Yes,
question?
yes, I
Okay.
believe so.
Oh, first consideration. Why do you want to change anybody's mind? Because you think you have the truth, right?
Mhm.
So have you ever thought whether he has the truth or she has the truth, not you? Have you ever thought of that? What makes you think you have the truth and not that other person? Why don't you allow them to change your mind? So, when that's the attitude, remember, as a neutral inquirer, you should allow both sides. So, it's not just, I want to change his mind. Why don't I allow him to change my mind? Because if he has the truth, then I better not stay where I am. I better go and join him or
Mhm.
her. So, the first thing is to ask yourself, how do you know you have the truth? And I'll tell you, most of us can only answer it by saying, somebody told me. You don't know. Yeah, you don't know whether you got the truth. You're supposed to say you have the truth because you're sitting in this club here. And in this club, everyone says we have the truth. So you're also saying it. You don't know. You haven't checked it out. Most of us have never checked it out. So I'm suggesting that instead of saying, how shall I change his mind? First, figure out whether you have the truth. Check it out honestly, like as an neutral inquirer. Then, when you do that, you will realize it is not just a one step procedure. Just go and tell him and he's going to change his mind, no, or her mind. No. You realize that when you're really looking for the truth, there'll be a few things that you will really hit you hard. And and one of them is you cannot change anybody's mind, nobody's mind. Don't even try to change anybody's mind. What you can do is place before them evidences and let them make up their minds. You cannot do anything about their minds. You must respect their choices because you expect them to respect your choices.
Yep.
So we don't go around telling everyone and changing their minds. We just go around telling them information. Here, friend, here's the information. What do you say? And that is why, if you looked at all the tops of the frames that I have put on, you'll always see the words, come search with me. Not I'm telling you.
Mhm.
Come search with me. When we both search, we will look at it. And when we see a few pieces of information, then you and I will agree whether it's okay. And you can disagree if you want. And if you don't like it, walk off. Then it will be between you and God, not you and me.
Mhm.
Between you and me, I cannot. And if you really are a Christian, then you will have to agree that only one agency can change minds, and that is the Holy Spirit. And if that's the case, then the only way you can change anybody's mind is become an instrument in the Holy Spirit's hand. So you become very humbling. It is not that I have the truth or I have to tell you, poor little ones, otherwise you are going to go to hell. Nope. It is, may I be used. If I'm going to be used, do I have the right words? Do I have the right attitude? Do I have the right information? And then we become very accountable with what we have to say. So it's a really good question. How do we change people's minds? You like to change. Maybe you're on God's side. That's why you want to change their minds. But remember, when you want to change anybody's minds, first we become very humble, strong, know why we believe, and just simply place the information there for them to make up their minds. If they don't want it, you can't do a thing about it. Even God doesn't do anything. He gives them freedom of choice.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very important point you made there. I think the next couple of questions are a bit similar, so I'll read them together. And if there's any differences, we can separate them. So the next one is, why is Jesus referred to in the Quran more quote unquote positively than Muhammad? I think you read in the chapter 19, verse 19, and you were referring to him being blameless and holy, and then you mentioned that Muhammad is referred to as sinful, etc., and in a more not so positive light. Since Muhammad is more recognized than Jesus in the Islamic religion. And then the second question that's similar is why does the Quran totally dismiss Christ as the Son of God and as a savior, when, as you stated, there are texts stated in the Quran itself about that talk about Jesus and his miracles?
There are quite a few questions in that one. So, like I said, let's break them up. So let's
Okay.
start with one. It says the question of Jesus being described in better terms in the Quran than Muhammad, when Muhammad is said the Quran says Muhammad had sins, and the Quran also turns about Jesus and says that he has no sins, sinless.
Mhm.
I don't know why. I'm not sure what the question really is. Why would you ask why are they saying that? They are saying it, that's it. They're saying it, and so I accept it. So we
Mhm.
don't have to find out why in one instance, and we will discuss the question of why next week, because next week we'll have more time for questions. The descriptions and the presentation will be shorter. But you know why questions are the toughest questions? And you should be careful when we ask the question why. We'll discuss that later on. But here the question might be, how come why the question of why is not answer why, but doesn't it seem unusual? That is the question. Doesn't it seem unusual for the Quran to speak better about Jesus than Muhammad? Yes, it is unusual. It is very unusual for them to do that. But they did it, and we know that they did it because we read it. So the question really is, do you accept it? Not whether it is said there or not, or why they put it there, but do you accept it? And if you are, then these words are in line with the New Testament because the New Testament clearly shows Jesus to be sinless. So the Quran and the New Testament is showing Jesus to be sinless. Therefore, our conclusion that Jesus was a sinless person is correct. So there's no need to ask why somebody else was not spoken of in these terms. We can just clearly state what we can see, and that's all we can do.
Okay,
What's
thank
this?
you.
There was one more thing. Why? That was the first question.
Yes. The second one I can read again. Why does the Quran totally dismiss Christ as the Son of God and as the Savior when you stated there are texts that state in the Quran itself about Jesus and his miracles?
Oh, yes. In fact, why I said also that in the Quran, he is called Al-Masih, the Messiah. But remember, the word Messiah in the Christian mind is different from the meaning of the word Messiah in a Muslim's mind. So the word is the same. So we use the word only to identify Jesus, not to describe him. When you describe him, the Muslims will never agree to Jesus being God, not even the Son of God. You know why? Because they're the most unpardonable sin in the Islamic tradition is shirk. Shirk means you can't put any other one with Allah. Allah is only one. So if you ever say Allah had a son, then that is horrible blasphemy, and it is so terrible that you can never be forgiven. So they will never accept Jesus if you say he's the Son of God. If you say he's God, then there's already Allah, then how can another God come around? So again, it's shirk. And shirk is the greatest sin in the Islamic tradition. So they will never accept Jesus as God or the Son of God. You can give any other description. So they giving him the description of being perfect, but not God.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he is a prophet. That's all. In fact, the Quran is very clear. He is only, that's the word, only a prophet, just like the other prophets, Moses, Adam, Isaiah, and all the rest. And then comes Jesus, and then from there comes Muhammad. So the idea is that Muhammad, Jesus, Moses are all in one line. So Jesus is not the Son of God. So they will never accept that. There was one more part. Was
Okay.
there?
No, I think that was it for that question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think you covered that one. Okay, so the last question I've got at the moment. Oh, I just want to put it out to everybody. If anybody wants to ask another question, either speaking by raising a hand or anything like that, please feel free to. Yeah, so the last question I've got here is, having had a discussion with my Muslim friends that Jesus is a son of God and explained to them about the Holy Trinity, I was informed that there was blasphemy. God has no children, only Isa. Isa bin Maryam is acceptable. I think that's more of a statement than a question.
The point really is the question of Trinity. Now, that's a difficult thing for anybody to explain. So remind me maybe Sunday or Monday, and we will spend a few minutes on that, because it requires a good explanation. The Son of God, unacceptable to a Muslim. Isa bin Maryam, yes, is acceptable, because Mary having a son is fine, but God having a son, no, that's not acceptable. But I'm not very sure who you are talking to as the Muslims, because in the Quran, it does describe the Trinity as, the Muslims are saying, you Christians have a Trinity, which we don't agree, because there cannot be more than one God. And you are saying there are three gods. And do you know the three gods that the Muslims say the Christians have? They say God the Father married Mary the mother, and with their sexual union came Jesus the Son of God. Therefore, you guys are polytheists. So who is their Trinity? Father, God, Mary, and Jesus. That's in the Quran and that's in the Hadith. But friends, that is not the Trinity of the Christians. The Christian Trinity is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, not Father, Mary, and Jesus. So if you want to correct me, dear Muslim, first you must be correct about the Trinity. You must be correct about the mistake we are making. Don't try to correct, which is not a mistake, or make a mistake and then correct it. No, the correct Trinity of the Christians is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which is never mentioned as a Trinity in any of the Islamic writings. They always mention or point to the Trinity as God, Mary, and Jesus as the Trinity. So I'm suggesting they should go back and read not just the Quran. Allah sent the Quran, but also the Injil, which is the gospel, and you will find that there's a little discrepancy. So you have to make out which is the right thing and do a little study over there. So if you're ready to do a study, then you'll have a good time. If you're not ready to do a study, then they will sit where they are and you will sit where you are. But don't get upset. They have the rights to make up their mind. So what I've given you is the idea that Trinity is something that is very unacceptable to the Muslim mind. Only Allah. Allah is one. Anything attached to him is called shirk, which is the most unpardonable sin. Therefore, we have to describe it in a certain way. And I hope that I will be able to do it sometime, because it can be described and brought to a Muslim mind even from a certain angle, which they might be able to say is okay.
Okay, thank you. There's just one more question. It's on a slightly different topic, so I don't know if you'll want to maybe address it on another day, or if you're happy to do it today. So it's relating to Isaiah. So it says, who is the subject of Isaiah 53? It says, a Jew will tell you it's the nation of Israel. A Christian will tell you it's Jesus. So which is which and why?
This is the third day it has come up, the same
Oh, has it?
question. And yesterday I told you, please go ahead and do this as a neutral inquirer. I said this is a perfect example of becoming a neutral inquirer, because the neutral inquirer has two theories regarding the same subject. Here you already have the two made. We are talking about Isaiah 53, and we are saying Isaiah 53 could be the nation of Israel, or it could be Jesus. Which is it? And I asked you to please go ahead and be a neutral inquirer on this and look Read up Isaiah. I said, don't read just 53, go back maybe from 49, 52 or something, and go on. I read from 49 to 55 just to acquaint myself. And sometimes I read the whole book just to know. So I'm suggesting to you again, like I said yesterday, read the whole of that passage, not just 53, and ask yourself, can the words fit into the nation of Israel, or can they fit more into Jesus? Remember, weight of evidence means evidence are present on both sides. You can have on both sides. There are some evidences going this way, some evidences going that way. What you have to know is, how shall we find the weight of evidence? I believe the weight of evidence is pretty clear, but I want you to do it. That's why I said, can you please become a neutral inquirer on that question? In fact, I wanted to ask today, did anybody do it? Obviously, nobody did it. I'm throwing it again. We will come back to it. I will not forget it. I have written
Okay.
down all the questions, all some 40 questions you have given. We will address each of those. We will not forget any of those. So this one also will be, but on this point, I would like you to first do it yourself. Don't be just a passive listener in this seminar. Get down to doing a little bit of homework. So go ahead and do this if you can.
Okay, thank you. I think, is there any other questions or contributions that anybody wanted to make from any of the listeners? Just going to quickly check on YouTube and Facebook. Okay, so somebody's made a comment on one of the platforms saying, if I use experience, logic, and evidence, there's no way I can believe that religion makes any sense. So that's not a question, it's just a statement.
No, it's a big question, really. He's making a statement. He's making a statement, but within that statement is the question of, how can anybody believe if you use these three? Say those three again, and we will respond not today, but another time. Which are the three?
So
experience.
If I use experience, logic, and evidence, there's no way I can believe that religion makes any sense.
There is no way that religion makes any sense. Actually, that is really a very honest question or comment, and it comes from somebody who has really thought some things out and has come to that conclusion. But that requires a little study back and forth. I would suggest. Here's what I would suggest. Religion is a belief system. All right. In other words, there's a system of ideas that you take and form a religion. And somebody else has another religion. And some people say they have no religion. It is correct, but it's not totally correct. Because you may not have a religion, but you do have a belief system. Nobody on earth lives without a belief system. Even the rank avowed atheist has a belief system. Mm-hmm. Think. They do. Because otherwise you cannot live a life. There is some set of principles which will be called your belief systems, under which you live and which governs your life. There's nobody who lives without that governing power, that governing set of rules. So my question to you is, can you describe the governing set of rules that does govern you? Because you do have. Nobody can live without a set of rules. That will be called your belief system. It may not be religion, it may not be even atheism, but you have something. So if that is the case, can you, as not just you, all of us, can we all, as neutral inquirers, scrutinize that set of beliefs as well? That's the question. Will that set stand scrutiny and will stand logic? First of all, you'll have to tell us where you got it from. And where you got it from, we will have to go and scrutinize. Is that an okay source that you got from the set of beliefs? Can that stand reliable scrutiny? So what I'm suggesting, friends, it's a good question. It makes us all think. So let's do the homework. Let's go and ask ourselves, what is that set of beliefs that govern my life, and write it out. You don't like religion, why? Throw it off. You have something else, okay? We will have that set, at least a few of those. You don't have to tell the whole thing. So here's what I'd suggest. If you can tell us 3, 4, or 5 tenets of beliefs that you have, who is without religion, but those are the ones that governs your life, and we will scrutinize that as well, because we are neutral inquirers. If you bring something, we will not toss it out. We will scrutinize that. And if that is better than religion, hey, we will go that way. Yes, we will go that way if it makes better sense, right?
Thank you very much. There's just a comment that's been added on to that previous statement by the same person. I'll just add it on and then we can address them tomorrow. They've just followed up to say, what's your views on this statement, which you've just presented? It says the burden of proof is on the person who believes that God, I don't fully understand that. The burden of proof is on the person who believes that God. I don't know if that.
Yeah. Here's what he's saying. You see, there are 2 types of jurisprudences in the world. Number 1 is you are innocent until proved guilty. That's one set. The other set is you are guilty if somebody accuses you until you prove yourself innocent. So when you look at that 2 sets, there's always the question of who has the burden of proof. For example, I'll give you a simple example of what we've been discussing. When you say there is a God or there is no God, who has the burden of proof? The person who says there is a God, he's supposed to give the proof there is God? Or is the person who says there is no God supposed to prove that there is no God? Then we'll agree. So in other words, the burden of proof is a very strong judicial argument whenever you decide anything. So whatever he is asking for is describing who has the burden or the onus of giving the proof. Here's what I would suggest. As a neutral inquirer, you do both ways. Take the 2 options and say, this one has the burden of proof, and do your work. And then turn around and say, this one has the burden of proof, and do your work. And then when you look at both of the approaches, then you can see which side the weight of evidence goes. Always weight of evidence, because humans have no proof. We only have weight of evidence. I believe you'll find the weight of evidence, because nothing can be so exactly equal that it's really, finely exactly in the middle. It'll always tilt a little bit to one side or the other. So that's I'm not sure what the question is, but if you can write out the question completely, we will know what the question is, and we will do who has the burden of proof. It doesn't matter what we start off with. We will do both sides, and then we will see where the weight of evidence lies. We did that for is there a God or if there's no God. And if you remember the first evening, we did that. We looked from both sides. So here also we'll look at from both sides. Any question, we will look at it as a neutral inquirer and see how it goes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think if the person's happy to, if you're able to come back tomorrow and then maybe present it again in the way that Dr. Pandit has explained, then maybe you can look at it further. But thank you, Doctor, for your time. Thank you for all the questions you've answered. I think we're going to end it here for tonight, and then we'll continue again tomorrow. And then there'll be another Q&A in the afternoon, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, there'll be a Q&A only in the afternoon, because tomorrow is a kind of a different kind of a service.
Yeah.
It's at 11:30, right?
Yes.
Yes, and we are going to look at the 3 studies in which Jesus does not come out first.
Okay.
You will not want to miss that either.
Okay, lovely. So thank you everybody for participating and for attending and listening. So tomorrow's topics are going to be from 11:30 till 12:30. It's going to be the Founders Compared Part 4, and it's going to be the topic of birth stories, the length of ministry, and death. And then the second session will be at 4 p.m. till 6, and that will be the Founders Compared Part 5, and that's going to be the post-death scene. So we'll be continuing then. So until then, I hope everybody has a good evening, and we'll hopefully see you all tomorrow if you're able to join us then. And please continue to share this with all your friends and family. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.